The first time my son told me I ate for free in his house, the potatoes were already cold. I remember that detail because I had been the one who mashed them. I had stood at the stove with my left hand braced against the counter because my hip still ached when I stayed upright too long, and I had added a little warm milk the way my husband used to like them. Not stiff, not runny. Soft enough to hold a spoon mark. I remember the smell of butter and black pepper, the low hum of the refrigerator, the cartoon voices drifting in from the living room where my grandson had fallen half asleep with one sock off. It should have been an ordinary dinner. My daughter-in-law Tasha was picking at her chicken with the distracted look she wore when she wanted to seem tired enough to be excused from kindness. My son Malcolm had one elbow on the table, scrolling his phone between bites, barely looking up unless he had something to correct. The kitchen light was too bright for evening, the kind that flattened everybody's face and made the silence at the table feel even harsher. There was a clock above the pantry that ticked loud whenever nobody spoke. That night, it sounded like it had opinions. I asked Malcolm if he wanted more gravy. He did not look up right away. He finished chewing, swallowed, wiped his mouth with his napkin, and said, with a little laugh that did not belong in the room, "I guess that is the least you can do when you eat for free here." Nobody moved for a second. Not me, not Tasha, not even the child in the next room, though the television kept making its bright, foolish noises. The only thing I heard clearly was the small metal tap of my fork settling against the plate. He said it lightly. That was the part that hurt the most. Not with anger, not in the heat of an argument. Just lightly, casually, as if he were mentioning weather, as if I were not his mother, as if I were some tired woman from down the street they had agreed to let sleep on a couch out of pity. Tasha smiled into her water glass, just a little. So little that if I had loved her less, I might have missed it. I looked at my son then, really looked at him. At the crease between his eyebrows that had deepened in the last few years, at the grey just beginning near his temples, at the mouth I had once kissed after he scraped his lip on a schoolyard fence when he was 8 years old and trying to be brave in front of other boys. It is a strange thing when the face you helped build with your own hands begins to speak to you like a stranger. I picked up my napkin and folded it once. Then I smiled. Not a hurt smile, not the trembling kind. A calm one, the kind that makes people wonder what you are still holding back. "You are right, baby," I said. "The least I can do." Then I passed in the gravy. He looked up at me then, maybe expecting a speech, maybe expecting tears, maybe hoping for an argument he could win. But I gave him nothing else. I asked my grandson if he wanted apple sauce with his dinner. I asked Tasha if she still liked the green beans with onion the way I used to make them. I cleared the plates, I wrapped the leftovers, I rinsed the sink. I moved through that kitchen the way older women do when we have learned there is no dignity in performing our pain for people who have already discounted it. But something had changed. I had been living in Malcolm's house for 11 weeks by then, long enough for my shoes to be lined up by the laundry room instead of the front hall where guests' things went. Long enough for my medicines to take up one corner of the upstairs bathroom, and then, after a complaint from Tasha about clutter, to be moved into a plastic basket under my bed. Long enough to learn which floorboard near the guest room door gave a soft groan at night, and which cabinet did not fully latch unless you pressed the lower hinge with 2 fingers. 11 weeks since I slipped on the back steps of my own house during a hard rain and fractured my hip badly enough that the doctor said recovery would be slower than I liked and more painful than I deserved. That is what he actually said. More painful than you deserve. He was kind, that doctor. Kind in the quiet way. He had not rushed me when I asked the same question twice. He had looked directly at me, not around me to the younger people in the room, and explained that I would need help for a while. Not forever. A while. My house had stairs. Malcolm's did not. That was how the decision got made, or rather, that was how I allowed myself to believe the decision had been made. At first, Malcolm had been sweetness itself. "Mama, come stay with us. You should not be alone. We have the room. Tasha agrees. The children will love having you here." He had lifted my overnight bag from the car as if I was something precious. Tasha had lit a candle in the guest room and put clean towels at the foot of the bed. My granddaughter had drawn me a welcome picture in purple marker with 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a yellow square house. When people want credit for kindness, they know how to stage the room. The first week, Malcolm brought me tea before work. The second week, Tasha asked whether I needed help washing my hair. By the third, little cracks had begun to show. The sigh when I asked where the ibuprofen had been moved. The way Tasha started saying, "your mother," instead of "mama," when speaking to Malcolm in front of me. The fact that every kindness began to arrive with a calendar attached to it. "How much longer do you think therapy will take? Are you sure your house cannot be rented while you are here? Maybe it would be easier if you consolidated things." Always in soft voices, always dressed like practical concern. I told myself they were stressed. I told myself mortgages make young couples anxious. Children are expensive. Groceries cost too much. Everybody is tired. Everybody is carrying invisible things. I had lived long enough to know that people can love you and still fail you in small daily ways. I tried to place Malcolm's sharpness in that ordinary human category. Fatigue, pride, worry. The erosion of tenderness that comes when a man feels behind in his own life. But there was something about that sentence at dinner that did not belong to stress. "You eat for free here." That was not exhaustion talking. That was inventory. After the kitchen was clean, I took my pills upstairs with a glass of water and closed the guest room door softly behind me. The room smelled faintly of lavender spray and old drywall. It had never fully stopped smelling unused, no matter how many nights I slept there. There was a narrow bed, a lamp with a cream shade, one framed print of a blue heron over the dresser, and a chair in the corner where I folded my clothes instead of hanging them, because I had understood, even before anybody said it plainly, that I was not supposed to settle in too deeply. Through the wall I could hear Malcolm's voice downstairs, low and irritated. Then Tasha's, sharper, quicker. Then both of them quiet. A minute later there came the dry rattle of the ice dispenser in the kitchen and the thud of a cabinet shut too hard. I sat on the edge of the bed and held the glass in both hands. My wedding ring had begun to feel looser since Harold died. Grief changes the body in unromantic ways. People talk about the heart, but they do not tell you how often loss passes through the hands. How many times you reach for someone in a doorway or turn to speak into a room that has already forgotten their shape. Harold had been gone 19 months. Some mornings I still woke with one sentence already formed for him before memory could stop me. "You would have hated this," I thought, "not staying with our son." Harold had loved our sons stubbornly, the way fathers often love boys who keep portions of themselves behind locked doors. He would have hated the tone, the accounting in it, the tiny public cut designed not to leave blood on the floor, but to make sure I felt the blade. I set the water down and reached for my phone. For a moment I just held it in my palm, staring at the dark screen. I was not dramatic by nature. I had never been one of those women who called 3 friends over one rude sentence and turned a bruise into a parade. But age teaches you something pride never does. Small humiliations are rarely small when they arrive in patterns. And if you wait too long to name a pattern, eventually other people name your place for you. So I unlocked the phone and scrolled to a number I had not used in nearly a year. My fingers were steady. When the voice on the other end answered, warm and alert despite the hour. I spoke quietly so nobody downstairs would hear. "Hello, Naomi. It is Evelyn. I need to ask you something about my house." There was a short pause. Then her voice changed in that way professional voices do when the heart steps aside and the mind comes forward. "Of course," she said. "What happened?" I looked at the guest room door, at the thin line of shadow underneath it, at the suitcase still half packed near the chair, because somewhere inside myself I had never fully unpacked hope from caution. "Nothing has happened yet," I said. And as I listened to the silence on the other end of the line, I realised that was no longer the same thing as saying nothing was wrong. Naomi did not rush me. That was one of the reasons Harold trusted her. She had handled the paperwork after he died, the transfer of accounts, the insurance forms, the legal mess nobody warns you about when they still say things like, "I am sorry for your loss," in those soft, practiced voices. She was not family, and maybe that was why she had been able to stand steady in the middle of our grief. Family gets flooded. Professionals can sometimes build little sandbags around truth. "What happened, Evelyn?" she asked again, more gently this time. I told her I was staying with Malcolm while my hip healed. I told her there had been tension in the house. I did not repeat my son's words. Somehow they felt uglier spoken aloud. I only said I needed to understand exactly where things stood with my property and what documents existed, where they were kept, what had already been filed, and whether anyone besides me had any authority over decisions concerning the house. Naomi was quiet for a beat. Then she said, "Nobody but you." I felt something cold move through me then. Not fear exactly, but recognition. She continued in that careful tone that always sounded as if she were laying out clean instruments before touching a wound. The house was solely in my name. Harold had made sure of that years earlier, when he refinanced after his first heart scare. There was no transfer on death deed giving Malcolm automatic control. There was no power of attorney on file. Naomi asked whether I had signed anything since the fall. Any medical authorization, estate update, banking convenience form, anything at all. "No," I said. "Nothing." "Good," she replied, and I heard paper move on her end of the line. "Keep it that way until I look over everything with you. Where are your copies of the deed, insurance papers, and the trust notes Harold left?" "In the blue file box," I said. "I brought it with me." "Did you?" It took me a second to understand the shape of her question. I looked toward the closet. When Malcolm moved me in, he had carried most of my things upstairs himself. I had been sore, embarrassed, grateful. The blue file box had been one of the last things he brought in from my car. I remembered because I had told him to be careful with it, and he had smiled and said, "I know, Mama, this is the important stuff." I stood up too fast and my hip answered with a sharp ache. I steadied myself against the dresser, then crossed the room slowly and opened the closet door. 2 sweaters. My church coat. 1 folded travel blanket. The box was not there. "Maybe I moved it," I said, though even to my own ears it sounded weak. Naomi said nothing. I crouched with difficulty and checked under the bed, though I already knew. Then behind the chair, then in the dresser drawers, where Tasha had neatly folded my nightgowns and underthings in a way that made me feel less like a guest than a handled object. No box. My mouth had gone dry. "Naomi," I said, "it is not here." The silence after that was different, harder. "All right," she said. "Do not accuse anyone tonight. Listen carefully to me. Tomorrow morning you call your insurance company and ask whether any recent inquiries have been made about the property. Then you check your bank accounts and your mail forwarding. And Evelyn, if there are medications that make you drowsy, keep them with you, not out in the bathroom or kitchen." I sat back down on the edge of the bed. That last part landed strangely. It should have sounded extreme. Instead, it sounded practical. That frightened me more.
Why would you say that, Naomi?
Because when older women become inconvenient, people often start by making them appear confused, she said quietly. I am not telling you that is what is happening. I am telling you not to give anyone room to say it. The room around me seemed to shrink. Through the window, I could see the dark outline of the maple in Malcolm's front yard moving slightly in the wind. Somewhere down the hall, one of the children coughed in sleep. Ordinary house sounds. Familiar sounds. That was the cruelty of it. Harm almost never arrives with music underneath it. It comes wrapped in routines, in dish soap, in folded towels, in somebody asking whether you took your pills. I thanked her. We agreed to speak the next afternoon when Malcolm and Tasha would both be at work. Before hanging up, Naomi said something Harold used to say when he felt the ground shifting under his feet. Pay attention to what people ask when they think you are tired. I lay awake a long time after that. The house had its nighttime language by then. The settling creak near the stairs. The distant sigh of the central air. A car passing too fast on the main road. Once, around midnight, I heard Malcolm and Tasha talking in their room down the hall. Not the words, only the rhythm. His voice low and defensive, hers clipped, relentless. Then a drawer opening, then silence. At breakfast the next morning, Tasha was especially sweet. That alone would have made me wary. She set a bowl of oatmeal in front of me, added cinnamon without asking, and said, "We should really talk about getting your place ready to sell before the market shifts." She said it while slicing strawberries for the children's lunches. Casual, efficient, as if she were suggesting we rotate mattresses or change brands of detergent. I lifted my spoon and blew on the oatmeal. It smelled faintly of vanilla. Tasha always added too much. "Sell it," I repeated. "Well, eventually," she said with a shrug. "I mean, you cannot keep climbing those stairs forever, and it just seems silly for the house to sit there empty when you are here. Here. Not healing here. Not staying here for now. Just here. As though I had already crossed some invisible line into permanent storage." Malcolm came in, knotting his tie, kissed the top of one child's head, grabbed coffee, and reached for toast without looking up. Tasha handed him a lunch container and said, "Tell your mother what you told me about assisted living near your office." He froze for half a second. That was enough. He recovered quickly. Too quickly. "It was nothing, Mama. We were just talking about options later." Way later. You know, just being practical. I looked at him over the rim of my spoon. "You children have become very practical," I said. Tasha laughed as if I had made a joke. The children left for school. Malcolm left for work. Tasha lingered in the kitchen, checking messages on her phone. She wore a lemon-coloured blouse and gold hoops, and she kept glancing toward me with that brittle brightness women sometimes wear when they want cooperation without intimacy. Before she left, she opened the junk drawer and took out a small ring of keys. "Have you seen an extra mailbox key anywhere?" she asked. "Malcolm said you might have had some of the house keys mixed in with your things." "No," I said. "I have not." She gave a quick nod. Too quick. Then she left. As soon as I heard the garage door close, I took my phone and checked my email. Nothing obvious. Then I called the insurance company. The young man on the line was polite and sleepy sounding, the kind of voice that still says "ma'am" as if he means it. He confirmed my coverage was active. Then, after I asked the question twice in 2 different ways, he told me there had been a request for a copy of the declaration page 3 weeks earlier. "Requested by whom?" I asked. He could not give me a name, only that someone had called from a number not listed on my account, claimed to be assisting with my affairs, and was denied because they could not answer the security question. I thanked him and wrote the date down on the back of an old envelope. 3 weeks earlier. That would have been right around the time Tasha had started asking whether my house had ever been appraised after Harold's death. Right around the time Malcolm began offering to drive over there alone to check the pipes and air it out. Right around the time my blood pressure medicine had gone missing for 2 days and then reappeared in the pantry behind the paper towels, though I knew I had never put it there. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after that, staring at the fruit bowl in the centre. Bananas too ripe. One apple with a bruise the colour of tea. A grocery list under the salt shaker in Tasha's rounded handwriting. Milk, eggs, dryer sheets, birthday gift for Ava. It is unsettling how normal betrayal looks when laid beside domestic life. Evil is too dramatic a word for most of what people do to one another. Most harm comes dressed as reason, comes carrying a reusable shopping bag. When Naomi called me back that afternoon, I told her about the missing file box, the insurance inquiry, the keys, the assisted living comment. She exhaled slowly. Evelyn, do you have anyone else you trust? A sister? A friend from church? Someone who can be physically near you if needed? I thought of my younger sister in Atlanta with her bad knees and crowded life. I thought of church women who loved me sincerely, but would tell the prayer line before they told the truth. Then I thought of Loretta from the choir, who missed nothing and spoke only after thinking. Loretta, I said. Good. Tell one person, not 10, 1. And I want you to do something else. When Malcolm is home, ask casually for the file box. Watch his face before he answers. That evening, I did exactly that. Dinner was spaghetti, though Tasha undercooked the noodles and oversalted the sauce. The children were loud in the happy, tired way children are when they feel safe, and do not yet understand how grown people bruise one another with politeness. Malcolm had loosened his tie and was in a good mood, or performing one. He kept showing the children some silly filter on his phone that made his ears look like rabbit ears. I watched him laugh and tried to find the little boy he used to be inside the man at my table. After the children went to wash up, I folded my napkin and said, Malcolm, where did you put my blue file box when you brought my things in? He reached for his water. What box? The blue one, with Harold's papers, house papers, insurance, all of it. His hand stopped halfway to his mouth. Only for a second that I saw it. Tasha looked up too quickly, then down again. I do not know, Mamma, he said. Maybe you left it at home. No, I said. I did not. He took a drink, did not meet my eyes. Well, maybe it is in the garage. I moved a lot of stuff that day. Tasha set her fork down carefully. If it is that important, we should probably all sit down this weekend and organise everything. That way there is no confusion. There it was again. Confusion. I felt something inside me turn very still. Not anger. Stillness. A kind of inward straightening. The moment a woman stops asking herself whether she is imagining things and begins, finally, to trust the shape of what is happening. I nodded once. That sounds wise, I said. And because God is sometimes merciful in the timing of things, that was the very moment my grandson came running back in from the hallway, holding his tablet, breathless with the careless honesty children are forever dropping at adults' feet. Grandma, he said, are you going to live at Sunnycrest with Miss Bernice's mama? Nobody at that table moved. The clock above the pantry ticked once, then twice. I turned to him gently. Why would you ask me that, baby? He looked from me to his father, then to Tasha, suddenly unsure. Because Mummy said when you go there, we can make your room my game room. Tasha's face changed first. The colour left it all at once. Malcolm's did not lose colour. His hardened. And in that small, bright kitchen, with the saucepot still warm on the stove, and one child unknowingly clutching the truth in both hands, I realised I had been wrong about one thing. They were not waiting to decide what to do with me. They had already decided. I did not answer my grandson right away. He was still standing there with his tablet pressed against his chest, looking from one adult face to another, the way children do when they can feel a room turn dangerous before they understand why. Tasha rose from her chair so quickly that the legs scraped the floor. "Eli, go brush your teeth," she said. "But Grandma was just—" "Now!" He flinched, then looked at me, wounded by a sharpness that was not meant for him, but had landed on him anyway. I smiled at him as gently as I could. "It is all right, baby, go on." He left, small shoulders tense, and the kitchen fell into one of those silences that do not feel empty at all. This one felt crowded. Crowded with lies, with planning, with the kind of disrespect that had grown comfortable enough to stop hiding. Tasha picked up her fork again but did not eat. "Children repeat all kinds of nonsense," she said. "He hears one thing and turns it into another." I looked at Malcolm. Did he? My son leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. There was something familiar in the posture. A little boy bracing for punishment. But he was no longer a little boy, and I was no longer willing to do the soft work of translating his cruelty into fear for him. "Mama," he said, "you are making this bigger than it is." We talked about options. That is all. We are trying to think ahead because somebody has to. Somebody. I wiped my mouth with my napkin and set it beside the plate. "You mean because you think I cannot?" I said. "That is not what I said. It is what you meant." Tasha let out a breath through her nose, impatient, almost relieved. Sometimes people become bolder the moment they think the performance has failed, and there is no point continuing it. "No one is attacking you, Evelyn," she said. "But this is exactly why Malcolm worries. You hear one thing, then spin it into some insult. We are trying to manage a lot here." Manage. There are words people choose when they have forgotten they are speaking to a human being. Manage. Transition. Placement. Burden. Practical. Those words never arrive alone. They travel in little packs, and if you listen carefully, you can hear what they are really dragging behind them. I stood, not quickly, because my body would not allow drama even if I'd wanted it. "You do not need to worry about managing me," I said. "I will manage myself." Malcolm rubbed his forehead. "Mama, please do not start." I almost smiled at that. Men will build an entire private arrangement around your life without your knowledge, and the first moment you speak plainly, they call it starting something. I am not starting anything, Malcolm. I'm ending confusion. Then I took my plate to the sink and rinsed it under warm water while they sat behind me, saying nothing. The faucet ran. The kitchen light hummed. I dried the plate, set it in the rack, and went upstairs without one more word. That was the last normal evening I spent in that house. The next morning I called Loretta. She answered on the second ring with her usual voice, low and textured, as if she had already lived a full day before most people reached for coffee. "Morning, sugar." Loretta and I had sung alto together for 13 years. She was one of those women the world often overlooks because she did not chase attention, but she possessed the kind of intelligence that sat still and saw everything. Her hats were always tasteful. Her hugs were brief and full. She never said, "I know exactly how you feel," which is one of the reasons I trusted her. I told her enough. Not every detail, just enough. By the time I finished, she was silent for a moment, and I could hear her turn down whatever she had cooking in the background. "You want me to come today?" she asked. "Not yet," I said, "but I may need you soon." "All right, then hear me clearly. You are not crazy. You are not confused, and you are not overreacting. I closed my eyes. Sometimes dignity is not restored by grand speeches. Sometimes it comes back to you in another woman's calm certainty. "Thank you," I said. After I hung up, I called Naomi again. This time I did not soften anything. I told her about the child's remark, the game room, the assisted living talk, the missing file box, the insurance inquiry, and the look on Malcolm's face when I asked about the papers. She listened, then said, "I want you to come in tomorrow." I laughed once, without humour. "I cannot just drive over there." "Then I will send someone," she said, "or Loretta can bring you, but you need to review everything in person. And Evelyn, I took the liberty of checking one more thing this morning." My hand tightened around the phone. "What thing?" "Public records." The words came out dry in my throat. And there is nothing filed transferring your property, which is good, but there was an online estimate requested through a real estate portal last month, connected to your address. I sat very still. "Can you tell who made it?" "No," she said. "But people do not usually request valuation reports on houses they are not thinking about. No, they do not." When I ended the call, I looked around the guest room with new eyes. The lamp, the folded throw, the neat stack of physical therapy printouts on the dresser. The room had been presented to me as care. But care without respect curdles quickly. It becomes supervision, containment, a holding pattern designed by other people. I opened the dresser drawer and checked again for the blue file box, though I knew it was gone. Then I checked the hall closet, the linen cabinet, the shelf above the washer. Nothing. Around noon, Tasha texted from work. "Need anything from the store?" It was the ordinary cruelty of that message that almost made me laugh. "No, thank you," I replied. A few minutes later, another message came. "We should really sit down tonight and plan next steps, calmly." There it was again. Calmly. The language people use when they have already been plotting in private and would now like you to receive your reduced life with grace. I did not answer. Instead, I got dressed slowly and carefully in a soft brown sweater and the dark slacks that were easiest on my hip. I brushed my hair, put on lipstick for the first time in weeks, and sat on the bed with my handbag open, taking stock the way I used to before church travel weekends years ago. Wallet, medication, keys to my own house, phone charger, insurance card, small notebook, pen. Then I noticed something missing. My spare house key. I had kept it in the zip pocket of my handbag since Harold was alive, always there. Habit. Insurance against locked doors and bad weather, and the small betrayals of aging memory. It was gone. I did not panic. Panic is for moments when something surprises you. By then, very little did. I checked every pocket, every compartment, every folded tissue and receipt. Gone. I sat back and stared at the open bag in my lap. Then, slowly, I remembered Tasha asking about extra keys. Not asking if she could help me find mine, asking whether I had seen one. I closed the bag and placed it beside me on the bed. What hurt me in that moment was not the theft itself. It was the intimacy of it. The fact that someone had gone into my private things with enough confidence to believe they would never have to answer for it. Betrayal in families is rarely efficient. It is personal. It has fingerprints all over it. That evening, when Malcolm got home, he knocked once on the guest room door before stepping in. "You okay in here, Mama?" I was sitting in the chair by the window with my Bible open in my lap, though I had not turned a page in 20 minutes. "I am fine," I said. He remained by the door. His tie was loosened, His sleeves rolled once. He looked tired, but not the innocent kind of tired. He looked like a man who wanted a conversation to go one way and was trying to decide whether charm or pressure would get him there faster. Tasha says you were upset last night. I looked up. Was I? He exhaled and stepped farther into the room. Come on. Do not do that. We are all under pressure. The kids hear things. Tasha talks too much sometimes. Nobody is trying to dump you somewhere. Somewhere. The room seemed to sharpen around that word. Then where is Sunnycrest in this conversation, Malcolm? He looked away, then back. It was just one option. For what? For later. If your mobility does not improve, my mobility, not my wishes, not my life, my mobility, as if my body had become a project they had a right to solve. And my house? I asked quietly. Is that part of the later you and your wife discuss when I am not in the room? He stiffened. Why would you say that? Because my papers are missing. Because someone asked my insurance company for information they were not entitled to. Because my spare key is gone. Because your son told me my room is being measured for a game room after I leave. Shall I keep going? His face changed then. Not guilt, not shame. Those would have required him to step fully inside the truth. What crossed his face first was irritation that I had become difficult to manage. Mama, he said slowly, if you are accusing Tasha of something, I am accusing both of you of treating my life like an agenda item. He took another step into the room. You think too much of what kids say. You think too much, period. Nobody has done anything to you. We have opened our home, fed you, helped you, rearranged our lives. Fed me, I repeated. He stopped. The word sat between us. Something in him recognized it. The dinner table. The potatoes. The line he thought had dissolved into the air after he said it. Words do not dissolve that easily. Some of them settle into wood and cloth and memory and weight. That is not what I meant that night, he said. Then what did you mean? He did not answer. Because there are some sentences that only sound accidental until you ask for their bones. I rose carefully from the chair and crossed to the dresser where Harold's old watch lay in a dish beside my earrings. It no longer worked, but I kept it with me when I travelled. Something solid. Something that had belonged to a man who never made me feel like I had to earn my place at a table. I picked it up and turned back toward Malcolm. Do you know what your father used to say when money made people forget themselves? He said nothing. I answered for him. He used to say that poverty does not always begin in the wallet. Sometimes it begins in the way a person measures other people. Malcolm's jaw tightened. Do not bring Dad into this. Why not? You brought my house into it. You brought my age into it. You brought my body into it. But now the truth is too much because your father would not have approved. He looked wounded then, and for 1 weak second the old reflex rose in me. The reflex mothers carry like a second spine. The urge to soften so our sons do not crack under what they themselves have done. I did not soften. He shoved his hands into his pockets and gave a short, bitter laugh. You always do this. Do what? Make me the villain no matter what I do. Nothing is ever enough. I offer help and suddenly I am stealing from you. I'm trying to think ahead and suddenly I am some monster. His voice was still controlled, but I heard the strain inside it. Not only anger, fear, exposure. And under that, maybe something smaller and sadder. A man who had spent too long letting his wife's ambitions and his own resentments braid together until he could not tell where one ended and the other began. I looked at him for a long moment. Malcolm, I said, if all you had offered me was help, we would not be having this conversation. He stared at me, breathing shallowly. Then he said the one thing that finished something in me. You cannot live alone anymore, Mama. Somebody has to make hard decisions. I nodded once. There are moments when grief returns in a new form, not the grief of death, the grief of finally seeing the living clearly. You are right, I said quietly. Somebody does. He frowned slightly, unsure whether I was surrendering. I was not. The next morning, Loretta picked me up and drove me to Naomi's office. The sky was white with late winter haze, and the heater in Loretta's car clicked every few minutes. She did not crowd me with questions. She only reached across once at a stoplight and squeezed my hand. Naomi had everything ready when we arrived. Copies of the deed, insurance records. Estate notes Harold had left years earlier in his precise hand. And one more thing. She slid a sheet across the desk toward me. A draft intake form from Sunnycrest Senior Living. My name was typed across the top. My date of birth was correct. My address was correct. Under emergency contact, Malcolm's name was listed. Under person assisting with transition, Tasha's. The line for resident signature was blank. I stared at it until the words blurred. Naomi spoke carefully. They did not complete it, but the facility confirmed someone requested information, pricing, and availability, enough to start a file. Loretta said something under her breath that I did not catch. I touched the edge of the paper with one finger. This was not worry, not planning, not stress. This was preparation. And in that quiet office, with my husband's handwriting on one side of the desk and my son's intentions on the other, I understood something that hurt more than the insult at dinner ever had. They had not simply imagined a future without asking me. They had begun building it. I did not cry in Naomi's office. That surprised me a little. Not because I thought I was made of stone, but because there are certain betrayals a woman imagines will break her open on the spot. My son's had not. It had done something quieter. It had settled into me with the weight of fact. Tears belong to uncertainty sometimes. This no longer belonged to uncertainty. Naomi folded her hands on the desk. You have options, Evelyn. I looked up. I know. And I did. That was the first clean feeling I had had in weeks. Not comfort, not peace. Just clarity. A plain, steady understanding that my life was still mine in every place where it mattered. My name was still on my house. My signature was still required. My mind was sound. My voice had not left me. It had only been waiting for the moment when speaking would matter more than enduring. Loretta sat beside me in her navy coat and church shoes, her pocketbook planted on her knees like she was prepared to stay all day if necessary. What do you want to do, baby? She asked. What I wanted, at first, was not revenge. People think dignity always arrives carrying a weapon. It does not. Sometimes dignity arrives with a locksmith, a copied folder, and a witness. I want to go home, I said. Naomi nodded as if she had been waiting for that sentence. Then we do this, carefully. She had already arranged for copies of every relevant document. She gave me the name of a locksmith she trusted, and a list of practical steps written in her neat, slanted handwriting. Change the locks. Redirect sensitive mail. Notify the insurance company in writing that no third party had authority to inquire or act on my behalf. Review beneficiary designations. Secure valuables and medication. Document everything. If Malcolm or Tasha objected, there would be no argument about family feelings. There would only be paperwork and boundaries. Loretta drove me first to my house. I had not seen it in daylight in almost a month. Malcolm always said he had checked on it, that everything was fine, that there was no point tiring myself out with worry. As we pulled into the driveway, I felt something tighten in my throat. The azalea bushes near the porch needed trimming, and one of the shutters hung slightly crooked on the left side. The winter grass had that flat, tired look lawns get before spring decides whether it will be kind. But it was my house. Mine, in the deep, private way a place becomes yours after years of prayers, unpaid sleep, ordinary meals, bad news at the kitchen table, late laughter in the den, and 100,000 acts nobody photographs. The front door key on my main ring still worked, so they had not changed the lock. Not yet. Inside, the air smelled stale but clean. Malcolm had not been neglecting the place entirely. The thermostat was low. The counters were wiped. A grocery circular lay on the entry rug where someone had kicked it aside. Nothing looked ransacked. Nothing looked dramatic. That was the shape of this whole ordeal. Not wild destruction. Encroachment. Loretta followed me in and closed the door gently behind us. "You sure you want to do this today?" she asked. "Yes." The locksmith arrived within the hour. A quiet, older man named Raymond with a brown thermos and careful hands. He changed every exterior lock while Loretta stood near the front window, and I sat at my own kitchen table signing forms. My hand shook only once, and not enough to stop me. After that, Naomi's messenger brought over a small fireproof document bag, and together Loretta and I began opening drawers, checking cabinets, gathering what mattered. We found the blue file box in the coat closet near the back hall. Not hidden well, just placed there as if someone had meant to move it later. I stood looking at it for a long time before I touched it. The lid was slightly ajar. My deed copies were inside, insurance papers, Harold's trust notes, even my handwritten envelope where I had once listed account numbers in case of emergency. Nothing appeared missing, but the order was disturbed. Folders reversed, tabs bent. Somebody had gone through my life and expected me not to notice. Loretta let out a slow breath through her nose. "They were shopping," she said quietly. "Yes," I replied. They were. I did not call Malcolm right away. That too was intentional. When people have been operating on assumptions, truth lands harder when it meets them in public daylight, rather than in whispered private defense. I spent the afternoon putting my house back into moral order. Not cleaning, ordering. There is a difference. I moved my medications into the kitchen cabinet above the coffee mugs, where I had always kept them. I put Harold's watch back in the shallow dish by my bed. I opened the windows for 20 minutes and let in cool air that smelled of damp soil and traffic, and the first cut of somebody's grass a few streets over. Loretta heated soup from my freezer and made us tea. We sat at the table in silence, not awkwardly, just tired. By 4 o'clock, I called Malcolm. He answered on the third ring. "Hey, Mama." His voice was distracted, almost easy. He still believed the day belonged to him. "I'm at my house," I said. There was a pause. "What do you mean, you're at your house?" "I mean exactly that." More silence. Then I heard movement, a chair scraping somewhere on his end, the muffled change in air that happens when a person stands too fast. "Why would you go there alone?" "I am not alone. Loretta is with me. The locks have been changed." Nothing in the world prepares you for the first silence after a son understands he no longer controls the frame of a situation. "Mama?" "No, Malcolm. You listen now." My voice was not loud. It did not need to be. I know about Sunnycrest. I know about the valuation inquiry. I know someone tried to access my insurance information. I know my papers were removed from where I kept them, and I know my spare key disappeared from my handbag. Whether you touched those things yourself or merely stood still while your wife did, I will let your conscience divide that later. But hear me clearly. I am home. You will not make one more plan for my life without me in the room." He breathed in sharply. It was not like that. That is the sentence people use when they cannot defend the way it actually was. "You have until tomorrow evening to return anything that belongs to me from your house," I said. "Clothes, medication bottles, chargers, the framed photo from the guest room, all of it. Loretta will be here when you come. You will not come alone. And if Tasha prefers not to face me, that is her decision. But no one will step into this house as if they still have rights here." I heard his breath again, harder now. "You are humiliating me." The words came so quickly, they almost sounded young. I closed my eyes for a second. "No, son," I said. "I am refusing to be humiliated any longer." He did not speak. When I ended the call, Loretta reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. I looked at our hands there together. 2 older women's hands, veined and capable, and no longer interested in pretending strength must be graceful every second. "You did right," she said. That evening, Malcolm called 3 times. I did not answer. Tasha texted once. "This has gone way too far." I read it, set the phone down, and went on folding my clothes into my own dresser drawers. The next day was Sunday. I've not intended for that. Timing just arrived the way it did. But there is something about Sunday that makes hidden things harder to keep in the dark. Maybe it is the clothes people wear. Maybe it is the way church asks us to sit still long enough for conscience to catch up. I did not sing in the choir that morning. I sat beside Loretta in the 3rd pew on the left, where Harold and I had sat for years after his knee started bothering him too much for the stairs to the loft. The sanctuary smelled faintly of furniture polish and old hymnals. One baby cried during the prayer, then settled. The sunlight through the side windows made dust look almost holy. Malcolm and Tasha came in 10 minutes late. That was not unusual for them. What was unusual was the way heads turned after they entered, and then turned again toward me. Not because I had said anything to everybody, I had not. But churches are living organisms. They sense fractures. And Loretta, true to form, had told only one other person who needed to know why I might need quiet support that day. The pastor's wife. No spectacle followed. I want to be clear about that. Nobody pointed. Nobody whispered behind fans. This was not a courtroom, and I did not need one. But after service, while people milled beneath the fellowship hall lights, balancing paper cups of lemonade and 2 sweet cookies, Malcolm approached me with a plastic storage bin in both hands. My folded sweaters were inside. My lotion. The charger for my phone. The framed picture from the guest room. The basket of medicines from under the bed. He looked as if he had not slept. Tasha stood beside him, arms folded tightly, her face arranged into the thin, controlled expression of a woman who still wanted to be the injured party, if she could manage it. "Mama," Malcolm said quietly, "can we talk semi-private?" "No," I replied. His eyes flickered. "I am not going to argue with you in front of people." "Then do not argue." A few people nearby fell gently silent, not staring, just still. There is a difference between an audience and a community. Audiences come to consume. Communities sometimes stand still because they understand someone is trying to keep her dignity upright in public. Malcolm lowered the bin to the floor. Tasha finally spoke. "We were trying to help you." I looked at her. Help does not begin with stolen keys and unsigned paperwork. Colour rose in her face. For the first time since I had known her, she looked less polished than frightened. "We never made you sign anything." "No," I said. "You were only getting ready." Malcolm shut his eyes briefly. "Please, Mama." That word again, please. The same mouth that had once said I ate for free in his house, now asking me to soften the edges for him. I felt no triumph, only sorrow, clean and cold. Do you know what hurt me most? I asked him. He said nothing. Not that you thought about my house. Not even that you discussed putting me somewhere without my consent. It was that you let yourself speak to me as if dependence erased my worth. That is the kind of poverty your father warned you about. His face changed then, and this time shame finally reached it. I saw it settle into the lines around his mouth, the way he looked down, not because he had been caught, but because at last he could hear himself the way other people had heard him. One of the deacons passed nearby and quietly lifted the storage bin for me without asking questions. Loretta thanked him and carried it toward her car. Tasha opened her mouth again, maybe to defend herself, maybe to explain, maybe to remind the room of bills and pressure and space and the children and all the other true things people lean on when trying to excuse one ugly choice too many. I did not let her. You do not need to explain yourselves to me today, I said. You needed to explain yourselves before you began planning my life like a move on a calendar. What happens next is simple. I will live in my own home. You and I will speak when respect is possible. Until then, I am done being handled. Then I turned and walked away. My hip still ached. My steps were not dramatic, but every one of them belonged to me. The weeks after that were quieter than I expected. Not easier. Quiet and easy are not the same. There were practical things to do. Follow-up appointments, mail to sort, locks to test, a neighbour's son to help bring the porch railings up to code. Naomi helped me update every document that needed updating. I added language where language belonged. I removed assumptions where assumptions had tried to root themselves. I arranged for temporary in-home physical therapy twice a week and hired a woman from church to stay over on Saturdays until my balance improved. I made changes without asking permission from the people who had once assumed they would be making them for me. Malcolm called several times over the next month. At first, I did not answer. Then, one Thursday evening, I did. He cried. Not loudly. My son has never been loud in his pain. He cried the way some men do when they have held themselves upright too long and the scaffolding finally gives. He said he was sorry. He said he had let things go too far. He said money had been tight, Tasha had panicked, he had convinced himself they were only thinking ahead, only being practical, only protecting me and maybe themselves too. He said he did not know when helping had curdled into entitlement, but he knew now that it had. I listened. Then I told him the truth. I believe you are sorry now, but sorrow does not restore trust by itself. Trust is slower. If we are going to have a relationship again, it will be built differently than before. He said he understood. I think he did. At least enough to stop asking for quick forgiveness. I still see my grandchildren. That mattered to me more than my anger did. Loretta brings them sometimes. Sometimes Malcolm drops them off and does not come in, only waves from the car. Tasha has not crossed my threshold since that Sunday at church. Maybe one day she will. Maybe she will not. Peace does not always look like reunion. Sometimes it looks like a clean doorway and nobody forcing it open. As for me, I am healing. Slowly. Honestly. My hip is stronger now. I still keep one hand on the banister coming down the back steps when it rains. I still talk to Harold sometimes while I water the fern by the kitchen window. In the evenings, I make tea in my own cup and sit in my own chair and let the house settle around me in its old, familiar language. Some nights that silence feels lonely. Most nights it feels earned. I have thought often about that sentence at the dinner table. You eat for free here. What a small sentence. What a revealing one. Because love should never make you audition for your place. Not in your son's house. Not in your daughter's marriage. Not in a church pew. Not in the last years of a life you have already paid for with your labour, your tenderness, your sleepless nights and your prayers. If there is any lesson in what happened to me, it is this. The moment someone starts counting what you cost while ignoring what you have given, you had better get very quiet and listen carefully. Silence is not always surrender. Sometimes it is the sound a woman makes when she is finally deciding that her life will remain in her own hands. And I want to ask you something, heart to heart, before I leave you here. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your dignity? If this story touched something true in you, sit with that question a little while. And wherever you are listening from tonight, I hope you remember this. Growing older should never require becoming smaller.